doing was so interesting to me. I thought it would be good for the rest of you guys to see what she's doing. So I'll let James do the introduction.
All right. Well, thank you very much for everyone coming this evening. I'd like to introduce Heather Anderson. She is president of the World Genesis Foundation, and their mission is to leave no child without hope for the future. Uh, is a 501c3, a not for profit organization, and has been active for over 15 years. The organization has worked in cooperation with the United Nations Educational Fund, or Education and Scientific and Cultural Organization, and partners throughout the world to create new opportunities for youth in areas where opportunities may be limited or unavailable today. David, K1 AGEM, are members of the Yavapai Amateur Radio Club, and they work closely with the Yavapai Club to create and bring programs to amateur radio and radio science to schools and communities. And so this evening's presentation is going to be about lifting up and inspiring youth in amateur radio, which I think it's a topic we're all interested in, is getting younger people into the hobby. So it's very timely. And with that, I'll turn it over to Heather. Thank you very much for coming.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having us. And I'm so happy to see some of our young ham operators and their families here tonight to help us talk about this subject that's really, I think, a discussion for the community, for parents, for teachers, for the radio club members as well. So I'm going to do a screen share. That's all right here. We can all see what we're looking at. Okay. And let me get this going. Don't judge me by my screen. This one right here, I believe. There we go. Okay. Super. So tonight we're going to talk about youth in amateur radio, and David and I are going to tag team on the slides here, and then we're going to open up the mic for discussion, questions, and really hear from our youth and families here, because their feedback and experience is absolutely vital to everything that we're doing. I'm going to go to the next slide here. So there's three big topics that I want to focus on among talking about all the projects that we've done and things, and hearing from our young people and on Zoom tonight. But the first thing is about the three things that we have found that motivate and inspire our young people to first get interested in the hobby, and B, to stick with it for various reasons. And these reasons change over time as the students experience and are educated. But the first one is about connecting and having them connect to different subjects: science, technology, engineering, math. We're adding art in there as well, that surrounds that surrounds and affects their lives each day. So that means making applicable to their lives, because why would any student want to get into the hobby? They have cell phones, they have computers, they have technology, they have social media platforms. They're already connecting with people around the world. So how do we get them interested in amateur radio? And how do we teach them about the applications that radio and radio science have to their everyday lives? And that's one of the big things, I think, out of the three, that's super important. Do you have anything to add to that, K1AN? Okay, so that's number one. Number two is extending the programs beyond just amateur radio. So we incorporate amateur radio, but we also bring in space research and radio science. And why do we bring this mix together? Because when it comes to motivating and sparking the imagination of these youth combining these STEAM subjects with amateur radio makes it not only more relevant for them today, but it's actually very powerful and hugely impactful in their lives today and their futures. So that's number two, bringing those things together. And number three is individuality. So we find that young people today that are at that age of being able to express themselves, they're also in that age of self-discovery and how to bring these things to their own life and let their own personalities shine through different programs that we do. So, what the students are experiencing and learning, and how do we find that individual spark that inspires each one of those students? Not always an easy task when you have a classroom of 30 kids, but sometimes it's one child at a time. So we plan programs on schedules, continuing to try to create new educational programs covering a wide variety of interest, but making sure that individuality is an important part of it. So those are the three big things that we want to synergize and constantly think about as we're bringing programs to youth. So we're going to start with our first slide. I'm going to turn the mic over to K1AN as we talk about some of the things that we've done that have incorporated those three big pieces. And I'll mute while I'll do this if I can find
Wonderful.
it.
Thank you, Heather. Hello and good evening to everybody. Hoping you could pass some of that food over. It actually looks pretty good as I zoom in on the screen. Well, we've learned a lot, over the years. We've done a lot of programs, and I think today we have, I think the number's about 122 licensed young amateur radio operators under the age of 18 in Arizona and Eastern California. We got there by making a lot of mistakes, trying to learn what would work and what didn't work, and I think Heather summarized really well. There were a couple key success measures we learned on that if we focused on it would help make it successful. One, by focusing on STEAM. The schools love that. It's such a key focus of their core educational programs today. That's wonderful. And of course, making it relatable to the youth in their daily lives is very, very key. The other thing with regards to individuality, obviously, yes, very key. Silly things like we had about 10 youth building tape measure antennas. Well, when it was all done, they got the last step was to take a bunch of bling and tape and crystals and other things and personalize their antennas. When they build fox hunt transmitters, they don't build them in metal cans. They build them whatever they want. Maybe a plastic lizard, a Zippo lighter, maybe an artificial plant, but they get to express that individuality that helps them. And of course, by mixing robotics and radio science in with amateur radio, it does create quite a bit of spark. And one of the other things that we didn't have on the slide here that was a key success factor was the youth steer. Once the youth become licensed in their community, they have a vote with all the other young people in their community what they learn next. So they decide their future. And as long as it has an aspect of amateur radio or radio science, we agree with them and we move forward. So building kits is a big part of it. We start simple with basic electronics and the kits go pretty far, which I think Heather will talk about a little bit later. Next slide. And of course, the science of GPS. We spent a lot of time. Interesting enough, we had a small school in Saloma, Arizona, and we had, I think it was 9 students who got licensed in amateur radio. And we said, okay, what is your next project you want to do? And they said, we want to fly drones. And I go, my first reaction was, no way, it's not applicable. But then, if you want to go to the next slide, I think it might be not there, but okay, yeah. Yeah. So anyway, we said, yeah, sure, but here's the condition. We will fly drones and we will build and fly drones, but you must take a test and you must answer successfully questions about how does radio remote control work in a drone? How does remote video transmission work? What are the FAA rules and regulations? We even issued them a drone's pilot license, but only after they passed the test. And interesting enough, the test had to happen over the air on the repeater. So we got them active in radio that way. There is a lot of great elements of radio science circling around drones. So next slide. And that's back to you, Heather.
Great. And the other thing that I wanted to add about the drones and is the fact that we ended up utilizing them in the community later on as a public service, and the students actually did that part of it. So the next slide, getting into the robotics, so one of my favorite pieces of the program. We start off very elementary. We have a lot of creative expression where we start to understand circuits and how things are put together. You know, it's not just turning on a light switch and everything magically works, and how those things fit together, how motors work. And so we start in robotics very elementary, but they really allow the students to do some problem solving here. So it's not just that they put these things together and it works. A lot of them have they have to work with balance, they have to work with materials. It doesn't always work perfect the first time. And so we really challenge them to take those materials and become those engineers, those problem solvers, to create something that that works for them. And then they get so excited and want to show it off. And this is one of the basic projects that we do. We bring in the schools and community. I can do the next slide. There we go. The maker bots, the soccer bots, are another great robotics piece that we bring into the schools and the community. So these are completely programmable. They're programmable via phone or computer. You can plug them in, and they start understanding code, computer code, through these programs. And again, a lot of problem solving, a lot of teamwork with that. So really start utilizing skills that they're going to be needing in their future, educational and professional. And understanding the radio science behind the robots. So we start and we build from here. The hidden transmitter hunts. One of the great things that we found that the youth love. These are the antennas. We had a gentleman come and teach the students how to make antennas. I'm sure that you guys will be talking about that a little bit. And this Saturday, we have our last tea hunt of the season, where the students really get a chance to see the demonstrations, understand a little bit about radio, body fade, and then more sophisticated methods of tea hunting. That's like a nice little hide and find. Anything to add to that one?
Yeah, I think the other fun thing is that when we go to the tea hunts, the equipment the students are using, as well as the transmitters, are transmitters that they've built themselves and tested, and they actually both do the Fox and the seekers, but usually by the time they're fox hunting, they're using their own equipment, including their own transmitters that they custom built.
That's right. And it's a lot of fun to get the families involved too. So the families can come, even some of the siblings who might not be operators yet, but it really gives them an opportunity to play together in a way that gives them just a taste of amateur radio. And so we found that's been really fun for the families and for our new operators. Okay, I gotta go here. Next slide. Making contacts. So we participate in different events throughout the year, such as JOTA, where we can bring youth and their family, community members, organization members together. A lot of volunteers. None of this happens without our volunteers and in our in our radio clubs together to have the opportunity to make these contacts. And it's so exciting when the students make that contact with, especially with another young person overseas in another country, and being able to start thinking about putting those places on the map. And then we start talking about, you know, the cards, the QSL cards that come out, and these are little hooks that we utilize, that we've had a lot of fun with, and the kids have a lot of fun with too. Yep, go ahead.
One of the other comments I'd like to make is that one of the challenges we have, because in areas like La Paz County, the remote nature of the county and the poverty levels make it very difficult for youth to have access or have a common ham shack or to have any type of HF equipment at home. So we do lean a little bit here on IRLP solutions like IRLP, Echolink, and a real heavy emphasis on All-Star. And what's exciting about that, we really try to focus the youth on radio science. So we don't want them chatting over the internet. But one of the beautiful things about All-Star is that all the youth involved who are working with us now have the opportunity to make connections around the world and experience the thrill of HF until the day when they can have a system available for themselves. And a good example, all the youth in this area of Arizona and some other locations had a chance to speak with students from 20 different countries at the International Model UN session in Washington, D.C. And then we had a series of seminars and discussions between youth here and a United Nations Academy in Eastern Europe, where they got to speak about subjects they wanted to and cross-cultural awareness and understanding. So sometimes HF, we lean a little bit on the VOIP solutions just to make it accessible to all the youth.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm sure the students here will talk a little bit more about that too. Okay, next slide. The radio science of drones. So K1AN started to talk about this and everything that went into the drone flying. You can see some of the students down there who received their license. The interesting thing too, besides doing the test on the air, which everyone could listen into, was that they then got to utilize their skills in the community during emergency preparedness. So this was something that that happened a couple times in La Paz County, that the students got to use their drone knowledge for. Go to the next slide. Another flying the drone one. And one of the things as we go through these activities, you know, being part of the amateur radio organization where we have field days, where we have things like UMA and Hamfest, what's wonderful being able to participate and bring these hands-on activities for students to engage in and see what might be interest for them, because even in amateur radio, students have interest in different things in amateur radio, and that changes as they, you know, as they grow. One of the great thing is it was a nice catch to allow students and their families to sign up for an amateur radio license class if they were interested. So we really utilize those platforms like Field Day and the Fest to be able to bring the families and the youth in these free hands-on activities, and then offer a free class to them that they would be able to get their license either just as a student or even the entire family, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit with our guest here today. Radio Science in Space, K1AN.
Yeah, I think one of the most exciting things, if you really think about it today, other than through the use of a telescope, almost everything that we observe and learned and understand from space, everything that the planetary explorers and asteroid explorers are learning, are laced with radio science. As a matter of fact, a good thing we try to walk the youth through. If there wasn't radio science, what would we know about space? And the answer would be very, very little. But it's such an exciting tool to pull in, whether it be about talking about all the radio science, the radio systems on the Mars rover, to the James Webb Telescope, and so on. But we do spend a lot of time mixing in radio science radio space science along with radio science and amateur radio, which is of course very much aligned with the ARISS program too.
Absolutely, and I just wanted to add to that because this is something that sparked my interest in getting interested in amateur radio. Is that oftentimes we'll do nets with the young people, families, amateur radio operators around the community and beyond on something that's happening in space. So maybe it's just a Passover or the International Space Station, or maybe it's something more than that, and it's something more stellar going on. But then we can integrate the community, like maybe some astronomers, guest astronomers, speakers, or people that just have knowledge in the field, and we bring them together to have discussions, and we do this over radio. So it kind of is a lot of fun, and people can do that from the comfort of their own home during the evening when most of these things happen. So that's been really helpful as well. Okay, the robots operating the rover K1AN.
Okay, well, again, robotics is not directly tied to amateur radio, but a lot of our youth said, hey, they would like to get involved in building robotic solutions similar to the Mars rover. And so, to date so far, we've had students who've built probably close to about 26 to 30 rovers. And the goal of this rover that you see on the screen here is that it is controlled by amateur radio. And just like the NASA scientists, the students sit in a room at a computer using software they've written to remotely control, using amateur radio, these rovers to complete a mission at a remote area, maybe outside the school or a half a mile away in the desert. And we use video systems with that. But again, it directly relates to robotic exploration of Mars. Now the kids can act just like a NASA scientist and get involved in driving their own amateur radio rover. As a matter of fact, we're getting ready for another big program here next year. But it is also a great tool. We find that it's one of the things that also brings new students into the Amateur Radio Club because they want to get involved in this aspect. So just like any other program, we will do anything in those three areas, but they always have to have at least one element of radio science and preferably amateur radio.
Absolutely. And one of the great things about this program too is the students that built this rover built it from the ground up. So they had just had a chassis there, and they had to go through problem solving. They failed with many things. They had to redo things. So it really put a lot of skills into their hands, and those hands-on skills. In addition to not this big one that they controlled from behind the scenes, so they weren't able to see this rover, we had students build small individual ones. So we're bringing that individuality where they could put their own payloads on it and really bring their personality into that piece of it. So that individuality, and of course everything space is applicable to their lives, not only today but then also a big part of their future as well. And then integrating those STEAM subjects as well. So bringing those three things back into this one project. Go ahead.
And the youth that are on the air tonight, for example, they said, hey, wait a minute, this sounds cool, we want to do this, but some of us said, how come you're so limited? How come we're not mixing amateur radio and radio science with exploring a remote area from a mission control center using a plane or a boat or a drone? And actually, that's exactly what they're doing. The students online today, some of them are integrating amateur radio with remote activation of systems on a radio-controlled boat, with a drone, as well as a rover starting with a blank chassis, as Heather mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. I accidentally hit the forward slide. So we'll talk about soldering. So a lot of these things quickly um, need these skills that get students into learning to solder, right? Doing the robotics, they learn to solder, the badge work, learning to solder. So we know in amateur radio, we actually sometimes need to solder things together. So another wonderful skill that they get to um, do some hands-on projects with. And the badge building, we talked about that already, and it's something they can take away. You can see there's individuality to it. They're really proud to wear our badges, amateur radio operators. We always are with our call sign. Not everyone has a call sign yet, but many of them do. But it gives them that little hook so when there's an opportunity in their future, oh yeah, I went, I saw, I did. They already have that in the back of their mind. Another thing with the robots, these are our little Ozobots. They're amazing because they travel so well. I can take them on a plane. I can travel to different schools. They're very small and compact, and they're very smart as well. Completely programmable via phone or now even via computer. And they learn about color coding. These robots are smart, and they do tricks and different things that you either program to do or using color code. So there again, it really gets the students excited about what's coming next, and then bringing the amateur radio component into the robotics piece, taking them to higher levels of learning and thinking. And Morse code, always a fun part of the program, school or community that we did. You can see here Gordo with his huge poster of Morse code. And we start with things that are really basic. So their names. Every time we start a class, people make name tags, and I have the students write their name in Morse code, as well as phonetics. So we have a lot of fun learning the phonetics as well, and can play some great games with that. But it gets them just a taste of those things, and then integrating the radio part of it. Go ahead.
And one of the other fun things about Morse code that we found that was helpful, as I mentioned, the students build their own transmitters. When I say build their own transmitters, they don't use kits. They start and they do problem solving and design and troubleshooting and soldering themselves. All their MEMS transmitters of their own design are all programmable via Morse code. So the transmitters they built that they use in their fox hunts, they use Morse code to program the different features or settings of those. So they have a lot of fun with Morse code. Matter of fact, they're pulling me into trying to pick it up, which I desperately need to do.
And I too need to be a little bit faster. But even the students here, once they get their license, we have a slow code class that happens that when they're ready and they're interested, they can give that a whirl. And so it really just really baby steps into Morse code, whether they're students or whether there's someone like me who's just a slow coder. So. And snap circuits. Snap circuits are great to bring to the schools or to bring to community field days. Really allows them to, again, problem solve or take an idea and then really bring it out into that motherboard, the motherboard way in order to make something work. I'm going to turn it to K1AN.
If you haven't looked at these, working with use, look at them. They're amazing. That box is not wrong. In this little box are 750 circuits the youth can put together very fast, similar to those old little component and spring systems we used to have. But the difference is there's a lot of radio science activities in here. In a typical hour, depending on the age group, the students can learn about snap circuits and build anywhere from 2 to 3 functional projects within 60 minutes. And it's a really, really amazing and a many award-winning system that is definitely worth a look if you haven't seen them before.
Yeah, and the great thing about these two is the up learning. So when you get them, it's not, they have the basic projects for those that are brand new, for the little ones, but then they also integrate into the computer. So we're talking about college levels, some very sophisticated programs. So that's what I love about this is that it has that timeless factor that we like when we're thinking about buying these types of things for schools and programs and field days and all sorts of things like that. And the rapid deployment system, a very cool project.
Yeah, a lot of our students, a lot of the amateur radio operators really start stretching themselves. We've had youth build. You'll see one rapid deployment system here that was built as a science project by one student. It was a science fair project. Another one built by a very young amateur radio operator, 14 years old. We used it for 4 years over about maybe 12 to 15 events with the La Paz County Sheriff's Department. And it was built by a 14-year-old and about the size of a lunchbox that gave us great coverage along the Colorado River for events. But again, it depends on the youth. One of the biggest success factors, in addition to the three things Heather mentioned, is we really try to listen to the youth, especially the youth, like I mentioned on the call here today. What do they want to do? And if we can spin it in a way that it has a component of amateur radio and radio science, it's their decision. They lead their future studies and activities.
That's right. And this piece again was something that we used in public service and community events that we took the youth to. So just like we have here and you guys have down here, we have things like the Whiskey Row and different events where we have volunteer amateur radio operators. And down in La Paz County, we had the same thing. So we were able to bring some of our youth, bring this equipment, mentor them, or have other volunteers that were mentoring with all of us, so they really had that hands-on experience there, and they were so proud because they built it. And okay, and that's where we're going to come to the end, and I hope to really turn the mic over to you all to discuss, what questions you may have, ideas, thoughts, things that you've seen that have worked, things that you've seen that definitely don't work, and also to hear from our students that are on today and about what they liked, what interests them, what caught their fancy about joining and getting their license, and what's really keeping them here, and just opening up the discussion, other ideas, right? So with that, maybe I can turn the mic over quick to our coordinator there, to see if there's anything on your end before we open up the mic to our virtual platform.
Sure. Thank you, Heather. Do we have any questions here in the room? We have a couple of microphones passed around. Oh, okay.
As a retired,
It's on.
okay, as a retired teacher, how are you doing this program? Is this after school? Is this an elective during the classroom? And how are you connecting it to the Arizona State standards?
Okay, well, first off, Heather's background in education, she leads a lot of it, but it depends. It depends on the unique situation. For example, La Paz County, Arizona, since many of us are here, I know we have people all over the country right now on the call, but in La Paz County, Arizona, 23 communities. Do you know 2 of those 23 have a 99% poverty level? The other 21 have a 100% poverty level of population by national standards. In addition, it's 5,000 square miles where there's less than 1 child per square mile. In La Paz County, there's no way. The children don't travel anywhere other than school. So in that situation, we had to go through the schools because it was the only place where we could be guaranteed the youth would be there. And of course, they're a captive audience. We don't have to compete with soccer practice and drama club and all those other things. Rugby. Nobody plays rugby anymore. Efren will probably have something to say about that.
Ephraim.
And it really depends now, and that's a really nice thing in La Paz County. It's kind of interesting because of those situations and the lack of internet anywhere and computers in the home. Amateur radio was the first social media for the youth. Same could be very true on the Indian reservations too, that we've seen and had some activity with. In the case here, you also mentioned, how do we get the schools to agree? Very simple. Common Core. Why some teachers like it and don't like it, they're all required to report on it. So what we do is we show them line by line how an amateur radio curriculum of maybe 1 or 2 hours over 8 to 12 weeks can knock off maybe about 20, 30 Common Core objectives. And of course, in other counties, like here, we go everywhere. We work programs with the home schools. We try to leverage the in-school activities. We even go to the public libraries in the summer where youth programs are going on. Heather, anything to add?
No, I think you said it beautifully. We worked really hard, and there are a lot of things and resources already online, especially working in Arizona and in the California part. School standards are a little bit different. So being able to connect the STEAM subjects in amateur radio to those core standards was really key, because we didn't want to make it extra work. As a teacher, there's a lot to do, there's a lot to manage, and so we wanted to integrate our programs, whether in the classroom or after, as something that just enhanced what was already happening rather than adding to the plate.
We got another question?
Yeah, some comments. I'm Rod, WB9KMO. I live in Mesa. I've been here 9 years, and was in Santa Barbara for 35 years. In Santa Barbara, the Santa Barbara Amateur Radio Club, and myself included, participated in science nights many times a year, mostly in elementary schools. And it was fantastic to interact with the youth there, introducing them to ham radio and so on. Two things that we learned, and one you've already learned, and that is robots are very interesting to kids. That really engages them. We were having trouble getting people to get on the radio, even come over to talk to us, until we got robots out there. The first thing that we encountered was it was very hard to get, since we had more than one robot, it was very hard to get them to do anything except having the robots fight with each other. But eventually we tried to emulate a moon mission where we went out searching for moon rocks. And the most interesting thing that I learned from it, and I think the kids got a lot out of it too, is problem solving. You mentioned problem solving. It's a lot more than just putting electronics together. Invariably, the robots that we had would fail occasionally. And when they failed, things didn't work right. And the kids got frustrated at first until we explained to them, well, in real missions, everything doesn't go perfectly all the time. And when you're millions of miles away, what are you going to do? Just turn the switch off? You've got a lot of money invested. So we encouraged them to do some problem solving and figure out how to make things work even when things weren't perfect. A very quick story was the robots sometimes didn't move forward very well or didn't turn very well. And the kids figured it out after a while, after encouraging them, saying, oh, there is a way. I know of a way, and I can give you some hints. And they figured out, well, if you can't go forward to the object to pick it up, go backwards to it. If backwards works, go back till you get there and turn around however you can and pick it up and go backwards to bring it back. So problem solving is really valuable, and thanks for doing what you're doing. It's really helpful to the youth and to amateur radio.
Yeah, it's a really good point David brought up too, and I'm super excited to hear from Bianca and Matthew and Ephraim and the Andersons about their experience too. But that peer-to-peer teaching and trying to find opportunities for that peer-to-peer teaching is amazing for them. It's amazing to watch what happens. So we have like Ashton who won our award, the award this year. So excited about that. And, you know, as she grew in the program, she's the one that really mentored those younger students that came in that were really super shy or needed that extra encouragement. She also taught classes on everything from electronics and circuits to how her rapid deploy system worked and was also you know involved in some of the space programs and finding opportunities for that peer-to-peer teaching is key for sure. Still,
And thank you for sharing your ideas, because every opportunity we have, we learn a lot of times by making mistakes, trial and error, and every group of students is different. But hearing like your ideas about science nights, yeah, we've had some students do some science fair exhibits, but we've never done a science fair night. And what a great idea. Thanks for sharing it.
yeah, I like that idea. Definitely.
Any other comments from anybody on the, the meeting itself? Zoom?
I'm Donna, I'm with him. Yeah, I have given information to my granddaughter. She's a sixth grader in Goodyear. And I gave some information to her mother, but I'm not sure that got to the Girl Scout leader. But they're at that age when I think it would possibly promote a lot of stuff that they could get through the Girl Scouts.
Absolutely, and we've done programs and worked with both the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts. So the Girl Scouts also have robotic badges and things now too, and in the STEAM and then in the STEAM subject. So it's a great opportunity if you can connect with your leaders there. It's an opportunity to go and teach something to the young people and get connected in that way in the community.
I think Clark had his hand up with a question.
Yeah, well, first a comment. Where were you guys back when I was a kid? Looks like it was would have been a lot of fun. But I grew up as a crippled child. I'm physically handicapped. Unfortunately, I wasn't able. Back in those days, you had to have Morse code to get a license, and I wasn't able to get to learn the Morse code until I'd been an engineer for about almost a dozen years. So, anyway, my question is, do you do anything to reach out to kids that are homebound because of physical problems?
Well, that's a great question. And certainly, I know the schools have a lot of inclusive classrooms. So there's a lot of students in the classrooms that we work in that have all different, you know, abilities of different kinds. But we haven't done much outreach in the community itself for those that might have different disabilities or might be homebound. But we have worked with students who have some disabilities. I think K1AN will chat a little about that with dyslexia and things like that we've had accommodations and things for. Do you want to talk?
I'll just mention that I'm aware of a program up in the Rochester, New York area where the club there has had a amazing success with autistic children. on amateur radio. Where they could not find any other activity where they'd want to communicate amateur radio. They actually have a very, very remarkable program that I haven't seen duplicated anywhere. We've worked with children with certain disabilities, from legally blind to autistic, but not on a large basis, no.
Yeah, just to clarify, my handicap is that I have osteogenesis imperfecta, brittle bone disease. I couldn't walk until I was 15.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your story. I'm familiar with that disease of it. So thank you for sharing your story. And yeah, the homebound communities and homeschool communities is something we'll talk about, and maybe Bianca or Liliana and the Andersons both are homeschooled as well. So two communities that we need to do outreach to as well in our communities.
Have you interacted with the Handy Hands program or connected with them in any way?
No, we haven't. Not had much activity there. We have done some programs in the community. A program that was called VetNet in southwestern Arizona is home to about twice the population of veterans compared to most other states. And there's a lot of veterans who live in isolation for different reasons. And we found amateur radio became enough of a program that, or became not enough of a benefit, that we actually launched a program called VetNet, which is still active today, where either the veterans who aren't comfortable with leaving home or unable to leave home now have an opportunity to talk over nets with veterans about what veterans like to talk to. And in some cases, we've had a handful, just one handful, but a handful of veterans who were isolated at home that found amateur radio was a tool that eventually took them out of the home, at least to the amateur radio breakfasts and so on.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have other questions? Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. I know Dennis has a question, and then maybe we can. I'd love to hear from the Andersons or Anita and your children about your experiences thus far as well too. But Dennis, you're up.
Okay, I just want to put in a small advertisement. We have a repeater on top of Smith Peak, which was put in many, many years ago to serve a public service event that ran from Phoenix to Parker Dam. And that repeater is still there. It's currently linked. It serves as one of the intermediate linking points between Phoenix and San Diego, California. And there's the two repeaters on our end, and I think California's got about 4 on their end. So that's always something to think about. If it suits any of your training needs and stuff, it is there. And the other thing, I want to put in a good word. I saw the byline on a lot of your slides was the Yavapai Amateur Radio Club. They got some very good people in there. And you might consider at some point as a training effort mentioning their WinLink system, which is a way to use amateur radio to connect from your home to the internet system, or from out in the middle of nowhere back into the internet system, or into the internet email system. Let me say it
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we're very lucky. We've had some demos, and there's several youth here in different communities who want to become active in WinLink. And I do appreciate you sharing the repeater because there's like one of the activities we do, we call star nets. Anytime there's an amazing observable astronomical phenomenon or occurrence in the sky that's visible with the naked eye, we do things that are called star nets, and we don't do them, the youth do them. Like, for example, if there's a harvest moon, the students will get on the air on a pre-scheduled net, and they'll talk about the history, the superstitions, the fact, the science. When the total solar eclipse passed over a few years ago, the students had a special net called the Great American Solar Eclipse. And they ran a program. What's really exciting, the students right now are planning 4 star nets in over 2023 and 2024, which will include a very strong partial and a total eclipse in Arizona. So we're hoping that we can connect with other repeaters for special events like that, where youth all over the state can get involved, not just to talk with each other, but to share their knowledge and to maybe help enlighten people about what an eclipse is and what is the history and superstition and science behind it.
Hey, anybody like the Andersons or Anita want to jump in and talk about your experience as youth or as a family about what got you, interested, hooked, and what keeps you here, or things that you found that worked or didn't work? Mike is yours.
Okay, I'm Ezra, KJ7ZZK. What got my family and me interested in ham radio is we went to the field day in Prescott Valley at the Little Dealer, Little Prices RV place, and we went in, and there were little stations where you had different activities, different things to do, different things to learn, and everyone in my family was just really amazed at it, and we wanted to learn more, and so we signed up. Here's my brother.
This is Enoch, KJ7ZZM. Like as I said at first, we just went to the field day, and then after we decided that was pretty cool, we signed up for Dave and Heather's class at the library and went to that like once a week or something like that for a while. I don't know, it was a while ago. And at first we were like, we'll go the first time, and if it's not very fun, we just won't go again. But it turned out to be really interesting, and there's lots of cool activities, and they talked about the different ways you can implement ham radio. And so we all decided to go through and get our licenses.
That's right, the whole family.
Hey, Enoch, what is your project you're working on now?
Currently,
my project is going to be a electric skateboard that is remote controlled with like a little hand radio controller. That's what I'm working on right now.
I wanted to bring it up because as we were the students wanted to do a project, Enoch said he wanted to start from scratch and design and build his own electric skateboard. And I go, well, there's no component RF. So he found a really nice little finger-held Bluetooth controller, and he's going to use that for the radio control and operation of the skateboard, as well as he's going to be giving a 30-minute technical presentation to the Yavapai Amateur Radio Club on the science and the structure of Bluetooth radio communications. With, if any of you know much about it, it is extremely involved and very exciting. But back to you, Enoch.
This is Ephraim, KJ7ZZL. One reason I got into it was my likes and interests in zoology. So I was really interested in tea hunts, because that is something you use in conservation efforts with different wild animals. Right now, my project is a little rover that is connect like an RC rover sort of, that will have an arm on it and a camera and a light and that sort of thing. And Dave, Heather, yes, I was at rugby practice tonight, so there's that.
Maybe someday, Ephraim, you can build a rugby robot that can outperform you on the field.
This is Amy, KJ7ZZO. I thought it would be a good thing for my kids to get involved in, because I have a lot of family members who work in engineering fields, various engineering fields that have all of these things going on. So I thought they would like it if we could just get them hooked and try it once. So Heather and Dave's approach to learning this information was key in getting them excited about getting their license and what they can do with it. So since I had to take them to class, I got my license also, and I just like to say it's a fabulous way to keep track of the kids. Hand them their radio so we can go about anywhere.
That's right.
One more from the Anderson clan. This is KJ7ZZN, Sean. To address the educational part, Heather has mentioned that we are homeschoolers, but I am in public education. I was hired a little late in this school year, so I've been employed at a middle school here locally for about 2 weeks. One of the things that I mentioned in my interview that may have landed me this position was my radio. So in our public middle school, as well as a robotics class, along with a handful of other things. They kind of threw everything at me, but the class right now is learning Morse code. We're spending time not just looking at the patterns, but we pull out their laptops and their earphones, and we let them listen to the rhythmic patterns of Morse code.
Very cool.
And I've got 2 or 3 students out of about 26 that have just cotton to Morse code. After 2 days of practice, I could play them, some of the basic words, to, and, the, me, and they were picking them up. I'd play it and press pause, and they'd be like, "Hey, that was the," and I was like, "Yeah, that was." And some of them were just getting the first letter or the first 2 letters, but they are very quick to learn. I've been very impressed with their ability to pick up Morse code, something that perplexes me a little bit. So I'm trying to stay up with them, but they're doing great. I'm looking forward to moving forward and hopefully getting some of them interested enough to take the test and get licensed themselves. Another thing we do, sorry, my wife interjected a little bit. Another thing we like to do is a Sunday evening net. We gather around in the radio shack and sit around the home base radio and do a Sunday evening net as a family. And that's an enjoyable family pastime. And they enjoyed watching the rocket launching tonight.
Oh yeah. And you guys have also as a family been really involved in the community and those public service events that have happened here as well, which has been just fabulous. Something that's great to do together. It gets you practicing on the radio, and of course it's amazing for the community as well. I want to ask Matthew a question about what he's doing. What project are you doing, Matthew, currently that in the club?
All right. Matthew, go ahead. I'm doing a Raspberry Pi controlled rover. Can they hear you?
Yeah, we can hear you. To tell us a little bit about the rover. what it does, what it can do, how you might use it.
Well, I guess I would use it to try like obstacle courses. Probably that would be fun. Like scavenger hunts, where places that I can't go, small entrances.
And Matthew also he's tackled one of the hardest project. He decided to learn about his first endeavor into electronics was to build a Raspberry Pi controlled rover with video capabilities and about 5 degrees of freedom on an arm, and he's taking it all at once, like taking a drink out of a fire hose, and he's doing just fine. He also was one of the students to speak with the astronauts on the International Space Station last year.
That's
How about you?
right.
How about you, Anita? You've been very encouraging with your children about being involved in amateur radio. Why is that?
I think it started back when, hi, my name's Anita, and it started back, I think it's been 2 years that we've been with the ham radio group, where me and my husband, my 3 kids went to the event at Little Dealers, and we were absolutely amazed on what you can do with a ham radio and how many things you can operate and just how much my kids can learn from that. And I think that's what drew us in, kind of like the Andersons. And we've been with you guys since. It's constant learning because my kids are homeschooled. So I have to look for other ways on how they can learn about different things. And Matthew, my 3 kids took an interest, and they continued to do that. And we participate in lots of different things. And especially Matthew, I've just David gave him that box, which it looked like a robot, but he spent a whole day like just building from the bottom up and building it. And he had questions, and he would call David, try to brainstorm what are those ideas on how to deal with things that he didn't understand. And now we got other members from the group helping him, Robert. So it's been great, and they continue to learn lots of different things, and that's what that's what's kept me involved and committed to this group, because it's such a learning process. Every single thing that David and Heather has taught.
Great. Do we have any additional questions?
Oh, sorry about that. This is David. I was muted by accident. I also wanted to say what was really interesting, as Heather mentioned, one of the things that's helped a lot is Heather's drive to let the youth steer their own future. In the case of Matthew, he chose a pretty hard project. His sisters, Liliana and Bianca, decided to build, not from a kit, but from scratch on a breadboard, their own Bluetooth, personal Bluetooth MP3 player, which are in the middle of right now. So again, everybody gets to pick their own direction as long as there's an aspect of radio.
Excellent.
And I think we continue to learn. I think that's one of the biggest challenges and lessons as we kind of wind down from our discussion tonight. The 3 takeaways here for us were really incorporating amateur radio and space science, and how do we make it applicable to the lives of young people. That was one of our biggest things. The second thing was incorporating the other subjects, the STEAM subjects, the science, technology, mathematics, creativeness, and arts into the field of amateur radio, and bringing that piece into it. And then the individuality as well, and making it each student that comes into it for their own reasons and stays with it for their own reasons. And that changes too over time. So if you liked fox hunting in the beginning, you might be interested in something in more of the space science aspect of it later. But I think just being open to continue to kind of grow as everything grows and changes in our world today, in the youth's world today, I think that's one thing about being open to those changes and really being adaptable to those changes as well. Okay, Nan, go ahead.
One last thing I want to mention, as you can imagine, when one student picks a Raspberry Pi with a monitor, a keyboard, a robot chassis that's very sophisticated, it can get expensive. It's really interesting. You know who's paying for these projects? The youth did. They attended Yuma, and they sold some of their own products, their own self-designed amateur radio products, their own fox hunt transmitters and other products. They're very active in building and selling badges for the club. They even started selling personalized LED badges for the club for call signs. So what's really interesting is, as part of this, the youth also learn a little bit about taking some responsibility for funding their own activities. It was kind of interesting when the club said, ask us, well, how much money does the youth need for the project? I said, they don't need anything. They're thinking about making a donation to the club and the club members are so supportive. I mean, most of this would not happen without the great hearts and minds within the Yavapai Amateur Radio Club and everybody in amateur radio.
Exactly. I was actually going to piggyback off of that and say, the other important piece is that none of this happens without the teachers, the parents, and community members, and our volunteers in our amateur radio groups. So it's about bringing all these pieces together. We certainly couldn't do any of this without everybody's effort on all levels. So it truly takes a village to get and keep the families and young people interested and in the hobby and going in the hobby. But you never know where these future things take us. Some of our students, one of our 120 students that we have licensed now, had their license. Maybe they move away from it for a few years, they get involved in sports or other things, and then they have an opportunity to come back to it later in their educational career and go, you know what, I had my license, when I was this or whatever happened. Yeah, I think I still have my license. I remember it's good for 10 years, so who knows where these things can bring those students later in their education and even their future careers. So, but it definitely takes everyone's effort. There's no way we could do it ourselves, and that's for sure. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Looking for those opportunities and being able to lean on each other to support those endeavors. Are you talk about the So, turning the mic back over to
Hey,
head
Brian,
guy
did you
over
have
there.
last minute comments?
Well, I do want to thank David and Heather, and I don't know that I wrote everybody's name down, but I appreciate everything you guys are doing. And too bad that Yuma's not going on this year, so we won't be able to meet down there. But I saw their booth last year this year, I should say, at Yuma, and they had a lot of busy youth kind of running around, and they had a lot of things going on. It was kind of crazy, but it was a great sight to see, which is why I asked them to talk. So we do thank you guys to electronically make the trip, and we hope that there's any other last questions or anything from anybody.
Oh, we got one over here.
So, of all the kids that have gotten their licenses, do they just stick with the tech, or have they moved on, or is it more interesting to do all the robots and everything else?
Oh, it's completely different. It's amazing. We in La Paz County, we worked in about 12 schools. Every school picked a different path that they wanted to work on. Interesting. So honestly, robots aren't all the choices. Actually, I think a big part of the last half of 2021 and early 2022 and still going on is the local youth here picked fox hunting. So, okay, let's design, let's learn about electronics, let's breadboard our own transmitters, let's build them into different things, let's build our own antennas, let's go do some fox hunts as a club, let's do some fox hunts open to the public for other youth to participate. So the answer is and we try to do that. There's no real method to it other than that every community or generally every school every student who gets a license gets a vote, and they get to decide as a group, learning how to communicate with each other and process decisions, what they do next. And once they're done with that, they get to meet again and decide what they want to do next. So it's very different. Every group is completely different. We listen to them and we follow them and just try to guide.
Yeah, and the other part of your question too, most of our young people are with the technician. They haven't gone on yet to the general or to the extra, but we are maybe hinting at the Anderson clan that's on our call today might be ready for the next level in the next year. Who knows? But the other thing too, just with piggybacking on what David said, is, for example, Anita and her kids and Matthew and Bianca and Liana and also all the Andersons have decided that we're going to be getting involved in the big gingerbread building of the community. Okay, that sounds fabulous. They've done it before. I've never built a gingerbread house in my life, but we're going to give it a whirl. But we are actually bringing amateur radio into this gingerbread community that they are building. How is that going to be done? We're going to be discussing that next week with them. So, problem to solve, but it will have the amateur radio component, and they decided they want to do that activity. And it's a great little gateway to bring a whole bunch of new families and their kids up to where all the gingerbread houses will be displayed, and to get a taste of amateur radio in that activity that they're going to be doing. So I'm excited about it.
Great. Well, thank you again, Heather and David. Fantastic presentation and lots of great information. And I think David mentioned working with a lot of folks in the rural areas. Great aspect. I myself grew up in a rural area, completely disconnected. Well, it was the early 80s when I first got licensed as a teenager. And it's a fantastic connection, amateur radio.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was at that time. Phone calls just across to the next town were long distance, and I was talking to people in the UK and Australia, and it didn't cost a penny.
Wow,
other
yeah.
than the equipment.
And for a lot of these students, even today, this is their first bit of social media. Getting on the radio and connecting to youth in the county over is their social media and their connection. So 100% with you on that one as well. Well, thank you everybody so much for having us. Thank you for the invitation. It was so wonderful to meet many of you, and thank you to Anita and Liliana and Bianca and Matthew and the whole Anderson clan for being here and sharing your stories and ideas. And I think we are still learning from each other, so we look forward to the future and hopefully working with many of you.
Okay, thank you.